Space nerds, let's talk about Starwear, because this is actually, well, before we get started, this is going to fix everything in 4.10, but also it's actually not coming in 4.10. We'll get to that. This is the ability for you to have clothing and armor on at the same time. That's the first main thing about Starwear that people I think are going to love. The other thing is that it adds stats to everything that makes it so that clothing and armor are more than just, can you carry a backpack or does it stop bullets? We've seen this a little bit with the new combat clothing. Where is that? It's somewhere in here. Yeah, this new combat clothing is another part of it. And thus, when it was being introduced, Jared told us this.
And ahead of Starwear, which I'll go ahead and tell you is currently tracking for 4.11 in September, cross your fingers, there's a new series of combat clothing coming to shops in the verse.
So this is just an appetizer, and we're going to go through all of the stuff that has led us to this point. It's going to be a bit of a shallow dive. We're not going super long, but it should give you a good idea of what they have in mind for armor long term. So we're starting out with a talk that actually was between Rich Tyrer, who now runs the Persistent Universe. Back then, he had just been hired and was doing more of like the FPS actor feature team stuff. But he was on with Jeremiah Lee, one of the greatest artists Star Citizen had, unfortunately, who has moved on in work. He's still alive. And this was them kind of laying the first groundwork of what the heck armor was going to be in this game, because before this period of time, the idea of a lot of FPS on planets in points of interest, all that was sort of secondary in the game. Still very, very ship focused.
Look at it like you're buying a new ship. And we want armor to be almost like your own personal ship when you're walking around the verse. We want absolute meaningful differences between that light, medium, and heavy armor class. And so where does that start? First off, it starts off by giving it all power. So you can have different power ratings. Then we have different signatures in terms of EM, in terms of IR that tie into FPS stealth. Then you've got inventory. Now inventory is, like you said, you've got a physicalized backpack, but it goes more than that. That backpack's going to be modular. You'll be able to attach different sizes of backpack, and they will only go onto different pieces of armor.
Now,
so
I'm going to take a quick moment to break out of here. This is 2019. A few years later at CitizenCon, they actually introduced us to exactly what he's saying there. Modular bags. We haven't heard anything else about this since then. This is 2023. But I do think that along with the inventory reworks we've been getting, this is probably going to be a much better or a much more likely thing to come up after Starwear does and after they've gotten this actor feature system figured out a little more. Riveting. You can see where this would go. Hold on, I'll let you see him walking with it. Nice, very cute. So there's a lot to this they want to do, but it goes deeper. I'll let you hear more.
Have to make meaningful choices. And then you've got life support, which is, how much oxygen can I carry? What's the climate control in this system? What temperature can it survive? And temperature is something I'll be going on again further on. But again, then you look at, say, for example, the next layer is subcomponents. Now, as I took through the weapons, you look at attachments. It allows you to further specialize or further diversify. That's what subcomponents are going to be. If you want to, put heavy armor on, but you want to add more armor plating, or
subcomponents on the store, yo.
On, emission dampeners, or you want further utility and gadgets that we release in the future, that's where subcomponents come in. But really, that's just the armor classes themselves. That's the light, medium, and heavy armor classes. And that's kind of like just the base foundation, kind of how I was saying in the weapons, you've got your base classes. Now, where's the exotic gameplay? So that's when we're looking at, say, the classes and play styles. So we want to support the player careers. So in the PU, you want to be a miner, you want to be a bounty hunter, you want to be a fighter, you want to be an explorer. We want to support those on the ship side, But we also want to support them on the FPS side.
So this is literally the pitch for Starwear, right? In this presentation, which was in 2024. Yeah, this was them introducing it.
We really want the visuals to match the stats that our great character art team have made. So for example, if a pair of pants look particularly armored, chances are they'll have modest damage mitigation to match. Many armors will be specialized for distinct use cases. Currently, we realize right now bigger is generally better when it comes to FPS armor, and we know that shouldn't always necessarily be the case. There will be some armors that won't have EVA thrusters built into the suit, so you lose EVA capability.
That's a big one we'll talk about in a little bit here. I believe the super heavy armor does not have EVA capabilities, but I think heavy armors also aren't, and will require you to like carry a backpack with thrusters on them instead. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Some armors won't even be space-worthy. Specializations means getting better at certain things.
Spaceworthiness is also something that was just referenced in the monthly report here. As you can see, the team is working on Starwear's UI, which took several iterations with UX design to get right, given the complexity of the equipment rules. New additions include a blocked state that tells players when an item can't be equipped because another item is in the way, indicators for whether a piece is spaceworthy, and an improved weight bar at the top of the inventory. See, I'm not here to tell you everything's gonna be okay and everything is gonna be great, but I am here to tell you what they've been saying and what they've been doing, and you can at least draw your conclusions as to where that might go. This might not come in 4.11. Jared said it, but like look what happened with 4.8. They might run into more problems and might have to slow down again on features, so we'll see what ended up happening, but clearly they have been working towards this for a while, at least in concept. They have been trying to tell us about it from these sort of slides and stuff. And now in the monthly reports, we are seeing that the actual work is going in. The rubber's hitting the pavement, or whatever it is they say. And we might actually see it in 4.11. Generally, if they say something's coming in an upcoming update and you don't see it on the monthly report, it's probably not actually coming in an upcoming update.
Things at the cost of attributes and others. This is about compelling you, the player, to make tactical decisions for every situation you may find yourself in. So now let's look at some practical use cases for the Starwear system. Whilst all our armors are becoming specialized, let's take a look at a select few, which I will add are some of my favorites.
All right, we will be back to this presentation in a minute. I do want to get back here and finish up the details they showed, but I also want to show you here in the interim 2022, this is Rich and Chris sitting down to actually show this during CitizenCon, or the lack thereof that was that year. Now I think this does a couple things. First, it shows you how much Chris wants to talk about things that he imagines happening even before they're well and truly ready for Star Citizen, because they got it working for Squadron, but they clearly it took a little longer. Two, I think it still shows that their ideas for armor restrictions, consequences have been pretty consistent from top down.
Well, and as Chris says, in terms of, you know,
Here we go,
the EVA, this is what you're seeing here, is that you'll probably see some of it in the third person, the thrusters are not firing because
it's
decoupled.
the old VFX, but it's also the old VFX code. So we haven't part of the proper, this is a current PU suit versus what we'll have is a new one with a proper like pack that has the thrusters in the right position, and when you go forward, the thrusters going from the back.
So what you're actually seeing here is you've actually connected to this surface. So now it's almost like you're in a prone situation, but this is going to be what more our new prone will be. Again, you've got full 360 degrees. You can just move your mouse and you look all the way behind you or all the way in front.
And right now we're moving along here, not because we're thrusting, because we're using our hands to move ourselves along, and we're looking around as we're doing that. If we went out to the third person here, you would sort of see us moving our hands around. I think we'll see it a little later on. There we go, here we go. So we're just sort of pulling ourselves along, and if we wanted to,
it's a little waddle.
we could stop and we could
a little
push off
EVA
against
waddle,
it, and then we would just go floating out into space. So that's the sort of idea of what we call push-pull.
And so what you're seeing here,
he just pushed himself off.
So what you're seeing here, that's actually kind of you're just
floating. The thing about this
alongside.
that I've always wondered is like, what happens when you get to the curved part there? Is he going to run into the floor, or is he going to curve with the floor? Because that would be weird. So it's probably not going to be a perfect system, and maybe that's the kind of thing that they had to not do, because if you just if you pushed yourself off and just sort of hovered above the surface of a ship like this, you can't just orbit a ship. So I'm guessing you would just fly straight off the ship. But those kind of little bits of logic probably complicate the application
just
a bit.
Push forward and go, where you can actually jump off into space. But then this becomes one of the, if you look at physical traversal, where you've got jumping and mantling and vaulting, this is where we have zero-G push-pull. We have the tractor beam that kind of pulls you around in EVA, and then we have your EVA pack, which is limited by your resource of EVA fuel. So,
and we've had reports, I believe, of EVA fuel limits coming up a little bit. I think maybe it showed up in like the PTU or the tech preview at some point.
This allows you to kind of manipulate and go in EVA, and allows us as developers to build EVA traversal spaces, both wide-ranging and both small-scale.
So yeah, here's I mean, we were before in first person looking around, but here's us cutting out to third person
All right.
to actually show you.
So we can move on from that, but that's just a little bit of a look into the history of them not talking directly about Starwear, but again talking about things that are affected by Starwear. And I think that's important to see because it contextualizes the fact that Starwear is wide-ranging and they've been thinking about it from multiple points of view, not just, oh yeah, you got stats.
You know, we want you to choose equipment on the FPS that ties into what you're flying, that ties into the play style and how you want to play in the PU, because the PU's not an average game. It's a sandbox. It's Star Citizen. It's what you make it. So we want the equipment to tie into that. And so when you're looking at, say, player choice, what we did is we broke it down in between combat and utilitarian. And that's where we kind of broke down a matrix. So you can see this is kind of like all of the armors kind of
just
in
to
the PU.
just to show you how long ago this was. There's like maybe 6 full pieces of armor on here. Like I guess these are different. No, these are all different armors. I thought these were trims, but this is tiny compared to what we have now in the game. But I want to skip this and go forward to, this is always a cool medic kind of armor that we unfortunately never got. This is just talking about like damage types and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to jump forward to another point that was kind of interesting. Goes to show how detailed they're trying to get with Starwear.
Scenarios. And so, you know, the body has a higher surface area, and, you know, it has a high density of blood vessels underneath the skin, and, you know, the head's got a high density of that. So in terms of heat loss or heat gain, these different body types in terms of, or should I say, these different areas on the body lose and gain heat at different rates. So if you've got something on your, you know, your torso, that's going to give you a greater benefit than, say, for example, if you just put gloves on. And so that's when we've got some examples here. So if you've got, say, the guy on the left who's basically just, you know, naked, his threshold is like, okay, if it's minimum 4 degrees, maximum 35 degrees, you know what? He'd be okay. But then you see the guy in the second right, he's put basically a jumper on, a coat, and that coat is basically giving him, it's pushing that threshold down. So that threshold now, as you can see, is -5 to 28. But because that's such a large surface area on the body, that's actually giving him a greater benefit than if he'd just put on shoes or a hat. And then you can see the guy in the middle, he's got full clothes on. So he's got shoes, he's got trousers, he's got a hat and gloves. And all of that is basically working towards saying, okay, this is the operating temperature. So when you actually go into these environments and your HUD is going to say, okay, or when you're looking at the star map, say, okay, what is the temperature in these planets? Is it day? Is it night? Where am I going? You have to choose which kind of clothing that you want to go for.
I love that. I've always really enjoyed that. I think it just reflects the same kind of decision making you have to do when you're getting your spaceship, which is a big part of why I wanted to play this game. Now I'm going to jump forward a little bit so you guys can see a more active and up-to-date representation of how they're thinking about this. This will actually be using some examples we already have in game, so you can see where we've been moving in this direction. This is again CitizenCon last year, or 2024.
This is our pilot visor, which allows the wearer to link with their ship and cast MFDs directly into their visor. This provides the pilot with all the essential data like ship health and shields, so no longer will the pilot need to break concentration during an intense situation to look down at their MFDs. Again, like the leader in this situation, there'll be no penalties to flight, plus with added G-force resistance, the wearer will be able to get the most from out of their ship.
See, before this just kind of came off as whatever, but now we literally have the G-force resistance in game, so at least there's some movement here.
If we look at the pilot stats, they have fantastic mobility. Like I mentioned, great G-force resistance for when combat takes them to the limit of human endurance. And finally, this suit comes with the best EVA capability in its class for when remaining in your ship is no longer an option. Here's another variant in our flight suit class, the racing flight suit. This is what our driver will be wearing. This suit, unlike the pilot flight suit, has features which are more streamlined, which allows it to have truly unmatched G-force resistance for the hardest corners on the most challenging of racetracks. It also offers great oxygen capacity and thermal protection for those planets with hostile environments. So as you can see, this flight suit excels at G-force resistance, but it loses its protection and has much weaker EVA capability. Let's meet our next team members.
Yeah, this is what everybody is dressed as already. It's the heaviest armor you can find.
Okay.
None of this is new. We're going over some
Here's our
historic
tank,
stuff.
who is wearing our heavy combat armor. Combat armor is similar to what you're used to, only we're specializing it even more for combat. So what does this mean? We want our wearers of heavy combat armor to feel like walking tanks. The armor should provide fantastic coverage to limit any weak points they may have, and actually have a greater damage mitigation than what players are currently used to. Due to its mass, the armor will also feature the strongest resistance to force reactions, so that's flinch, stagger, and knockdowns, which brings me on to a full suit feature. If the player is wearing a full set of heavy combat armor, they'll not be able to be knocked down by small arms fire.
Find me with my Nerf gun, though. I'll put it to the test. And then we've got a couple others. We got sniper, we got pilot, we got this guy. And this is all what's going on in the background. When you hear Starwear and that it's being worked on, when you see these updates in the monthly reports that's talking about the UI, when you hear that like the inventory is getting worked to tell you what's space worthy or what can and cannot be equipped, and then when Jared even comes up onto Inside Star Citizen and says it's coming in 4.11, this is kind of what you can expect. Really customization and tailoring your character to your playstyle. Are they going to be able to get suit lockers in before this? They kind of have to, in my opinion. I don't think this is the sort of thing you can do without suit lockers because we get restrictions like heavy armor possibly not being able to fly ships. I don't know if they're going to put that in yet, but that could be a thing. We already seen that even if you can fly ships, you fly it at a much, much lower G-force resistance. I think that's probably where they're gonna settle there. They're not gonna make people not be able to fly ships because that's the way it seems CIG is going these days. But all that kind of stuff is gonna ask players to put down whatever they're doing and pick something else up. And right now in the game, that experience is awful. So they need to get suit lockers into the game by 4.11. That's the big thing to be looking at. It's been rumored that they were planned for 4.10 or so originally, like a couple months ago. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll keep looking at the monthly reports, checking out the leaks, and see if that's planned. But as of right now, this is what it's looking like for Starwear in 4.11. Are you ready? Specialized gear. Oh boy. Miss my medical gown runs all the time. All right, there's your drop.